Hello, and welcome to Main's Gains. My name is Christian Quartermain, and I am a student dietitian studying at the University of Nottingham. I am studying a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics, and alongside that, I am a qualified personal trainer. Today, we are continuing with Metabolic Mondays, and in this series of Metabolic Mondays, we are looking at the key organs and their relationship with energy metabolism. In this video specifically, we are continuing with the organ intestine and going into part 2. Let's revisit the contents page. So what we went over in the first video is what and where is the intestine, and we looked at the intestine's role specifically in metabolism. We are going to continue today and look at the impact this has on your body utilizing substrates, where we will look at things like gut transit times, rate of digestion, protein turnover, absorption rates of specific foods, and then in the final slide, all the information we have taken in from part 1 and part 2 on the intestines. We will look at some direct approaches of how you can apply this information to your fitness and health goals. So with that all said, let's jump into the first slide. The impact the intestine has on your body utilizing substrates, brackets, food. First of all, I would like to address a common conception. Eat small meals, but lots of them. Who has not heard this before? I think everybody's probably heard this at some point, either from a gym instructor, certified nutritionist, their friend, their personal trainer. And it is good advice depending on what your goals are. But why? Why is it important? You might hear things like, oh, it's good for your metabolism, but you don't really get an in-depth answer. Well, today we're going to give you a more in-depth answer. So the first thing is the rate of digestion. When you eat a meal and it's digested in the stomach and then it goes further into the intestines, as that food is going through your intestines, only so much can be digested and absorbed in one meal. Now, if you have like a really fast metabolism, you might absorb all of it, which is great. But everybody's metabolism works differently. You have people with slower metabolisms, so they might not absorb 100% of that meal. So that's why it's good to eat smaller meals. That way, it's not good, it's more likely you will absorb it all before it gets through your intestine, and then it won't be excreted out, rather than eating a huge meal, which could take a very long time for certain people to break it down. Another reason is gut transit time, which is pretty similar. So you eat a meal that goes into your stomach. What happens is your stomach expands like a balloon. When you eat food, your stomach expands so it can take all of that food in, but it can only expand to a certain degree. I have tried fasting before. I've tried it where I've had 2 meals a day. I've tried it where I've done 1 meal. The 1 meal was impossible. I was trying to reach my daily requirements, and I remember trying to force feed all of this food in 1 meal, and I was gonna throw up. I had to stop. I can't believe I didn't throw up, to be honest. I was very close. And then I think I had to wait an hour or so before I could finish the rest of it. It was very difficult to consume all of that food in one go. So because of that, if people are on, especially if you're in a mass gain phase, like you're trying to build bigger muscles and you're in a calorie surplus, eating like 1 big meal or 2 big meals, again, it might be difficult to reach those requirements in only 2 meals. And again, if we go back to the rate of digestion, if it's going through your intestines and your body's not managing to absorb it all because your metabolism's a bit slower and you're not able to digest the food quick enough, you're going to excrete a significant portion of that and therefore not absorb it all. Another reason, and this next point is kind of its own thing. It's nothing really to do with the small meals. Well, not really, mildly. But this is going back to the impact the intestines have now. So another thing is protein turnover in an adult. So I've put a few bits of data on here. So the intestines replace approximately 4% of whole body protein per day, and the intestines synthesize approximately 70 grams of protein per day, and that contributes to approximately 23% of whole body protein synthesis. So in the first part, we talked about the sloughing of cells, where the intestines is kind of similar to a snake. When it sheds its skin, it sheds its cells. It's going through a lot of catabolic processes, so a lot of damage is taking place. And because of that, the intestines are continuously going through repairs. It's continuously trying to synthesize new protein. And what helps is us getting dietary protein to contribute to that replacement. And now 4% may not sound like a lot, but it's actually quite a significant portion, because when you think about the many parts that build up a body, 4% then becomes like quite big compared to these other parts of the body that need protein as well. And 70 grams per day, contributing to 23% of the whole body's protein synthesis. 23% is synthesized in the intestines. That's a lot. And because of that, we need protein. We need dietary protein. It contributes to these repairs, contributes to that protein turnover. And the last thing with regards to protein turnover is that certain protein certain protein sources are digested and absorbed better than others. For example, the percentage of protein absorbed from certain types of milk is 100%. I'm sorry my head is in the way again. I really need to get better with structuring my PowerPoint, so I remember that my camera is here blocking certain words, but that word does say milk. There are certain types of protein that aren't 100% absorbable. And funnily enough, if I were to ask you, apart from milk, which I put there, what you would say is what your guess would be is the best protein, the best composition of protein that we could consume, what you think that would be. What would you think the best protein we could get is? What protein source? The answer is actually another human being. But I'm hoping that we are at a civilized age now where we can't go into Tesco and purchase human beings to put in our bolognese. I would hope that we were beyond those sort of savagery impulses. So we can't have that type of protein, thankfully. However, milk is pretty damn good. So get your milk. When I say milk, certain brands that will be good and 100% absorbable are like the skimmed milk. I'm trying to think. Breast milk is probably the best. But again, that is not something we can all acquire. But the reason breast milk is really good is if you think of a baby, and when a baby's born, obviously it takes in breast milk. That's how it gets its source of protein, and it's a growing baby, so of course it needs a good amount of protein to grow. But milk contains whey protein and casein protein. Whey protein is very, very fast digested and very fastly, is that a word, fastly? Quickly, it's quickly absorbed by the body. So people that have like whey protein shakes, a good time to have them. A lot of people think you should have your whey protein shakes after your workouts. It's actually better to have them right before your workouts, because if it's fast absorbed, so you have your whey protein shake before the gym, and also have carbs before you work out as well, because carbs release insulin. Insulin basically unlocks the cells in your muscles to allow protein to come in and grow them. Anyway, having whey protein shakes, fast absorbable, gets into the bloodstream. You're working out in the gym, so you're now creating that resistance to certain muscle groups. Your protein is already there. It's already broken down in your blood, ready to be worked, ready to help your muscles grow and build them bigger. So I get that people think, oh yeah, I'll have my protein shake afterwards when my butt muscles need to repair. And again, you want to have protein after you finish your workouts from the gym as well. But the best time to have a whey protein shake is actually before your workout. So it's already digested, absorbed in the blood, ready to be worked, ready to be used while you're creating that resistance in the gym. The other type of protein in milk is casein. And casein protein is slowly digested and slowly absorbed by the body. So a good time to have casein protein would be before you go to bed, for example. So you go to bed, you're not eating for several hours, 7 to 9 hours, maybe even longer if you've had your meal earlier in the evening. So your body kind of goes into a fasted state, and when it's in a fasted state, it's in a catabolic state, so it starts breaking substances down to use as energy, and it will break down some protein. However, if you have a casein protein shake before you go to bed, you are slowly absorbing and digesting this type of protein because it's slower to break down, it's harder to break down, it's slower to absorb. So that will prevent, ever so slightly, that kind of breaking down protein in your sleep. So simplifying, whey is optimal for protein synthesis. Casein is optimal to prevent protein degradation. If we look at something like eggs, they are slightly less absorbable than milk, but still a pretty good source of protein. And the reason that eggs are a good source of protein is because eggs contain all the essential amino acids. Amino acids are what are bonded together to make a protein. Then there are things like chicken, which are further behind than eggs, and further behind that is beef, which is even less absorbable than chicken, but still fairly good. You'll absorb most of that protein. And then behind that are things like vegan sources of protein. So plant sources contain cellulose, and cellulose is part of like the cell wall structure in a plant. Cellulose is strongly bonded together. So when we eat a vegan type meal and our bodies are trying to digest it, because those bonds are strong in cellulose molecules, it's very difficult for our bodies to then break it down, and that's why when it kind of is being absorbed, goes into the intestines, etc., etc., there's a significant portion that isn't absorbed from the protein because our bodies are struggling to digest and break down the cellulose in the way of it. It's like imagine it like in a shell almost. Like you've got this protein in a shell, can't break the shell, or we managed to a little bit, and then it's just difficult to absorb all that protein. We of course do absorb some of the protein from plant sources. So my advice is if you're a vegan, if you're a vegetarian, and you eat protein sources from plants, eat more. Just up the volume that you eat. It might be harder because obviously you're trying to eat more food, and as we've discussed about gut transit time, rate of digestion, these things might play a part. If it is possible, like obviously that's why I'm saying you get that advice to eat small meals, but lots of them. Then if you've got a recommendation for protein, if you're like quite strict on your diet but you're a vegan, up the volume a bit. Just have more protein. At the end of the day, if that ups your calories, I've already discussed in a previous video that if you're over consuming protein, there'll be a buildup of nitrogenous waste, and nitrogen is toxic to the body. So what the body will do is it will do everything it can to excrete that. So don't worry too much if you're over consuming protein. Alternatively, you could get like 100 grams of tofu, for example, and then look on the packet and it'd be like, oh, 20 grams of proteins in this 100 gram tofu, or tofu, however you pronounce it. And then you can be like, okay, so I absorb 63%, so then 63% of 20, and it's like, oh my god, that's a lot of maths. Don't do that really, just eat more protein if you're on a vegan-based diet. Final slide, everybody. We made it. We got there in the end. The part you've been waiting for. Applying this information to your fitness goals and your health goals, but mainly your fitness goals. Point number 1. The rate of digestion is different for everybody, but if you have regular meals throughout the day, your body is more likely to absorb and utilize more of the nutrients. For example, protein for optimizing muscle growth and preventing degradation. If your body is able to absorb more of the protein you are consuming, then you'll be able to use that protein to synthesize greater muscles, bigger muscles, or that protein to prevent the muscles you have grown from breaking down. Next nutrient, carbohydrate for optimizing energy output. So if you consume carbohydrate and it's broken down to glucose, and then that glucose is sent off to your skeletal muscle and it's stored in the skeletal muscle's glycogen stores, you want that at max capacity, you want that as full as possible. So then you have the max amount of energy you can create from that glucose to then be used to give you the best workout. You want to create a good resistance during your workouts because it is the stimulus from that workout, it's the resistance from those workouts that then sends a message to your muscles that we need to be bigger for this resistance. And then the protein you've consumed, that dietary protein, is then used, it's consumed by your muscle cells. Your muscle cells are getting stretched bigger from the resistance training, and then that protein occupies that space, so your muscle cells are bigger, so you've got bigger muscles. Yay, that's the goal. I mean, obviously this example is if you're a bodybuilder or if you're going to the gym and you're doing some hypertrophy training. But obviously, you want protein if you're doing sport, you want carbohydrates if you're doing sport or running or anything, because you want optimization, you want to be the best of the best. You need bigger muscles for certain sports to generate that power, and you need the carbohydrate to give you the energy to compete. And the last nutrient we're going to talk about is fat. So fat, you want to consume fat for hormone regulation, and fat is also used as a vitamin solvent. So when I say solvent, I mean there are certain types of vitamins that only dissolve in fat. So if you think of fat as more of an oil, so obviously if you're eating some fatty foods, it gets digested into your stomach, it becomes all mushy. Certain vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, and K, are only able to dissolve in fat. It's also a reason to have certain vitamins. So let's say, I don't know, you might be taking a vitamin D tablet. You would want to take that vitamin D tablet as close as possible to you having some type of fatty meal or fatty foods, even if it's just a snack. Nuts, for example, that's a type of fat. So that's one of the reasons. The other thing is hormone regulation. So adipose tissue, which is the fat tissue, or the tissue where fat stores, adipose actually secretes its own hormone called leptin. And leptin is a pretty interesting hormone. So it sends leptin off to your brain, and you want to keep the leptin levels in your brain reasonably high, especially if you're a female, because if leptin levels are low, it can affect your ability to get pregnant. And I will discuss that in a different video because I'm going to do a whole series on nutrition and physiology interaction. So make sure to look out for that in the future. Fasting does have benefits and negatives, which will be discussed in a future video. Fasting obviously isn't a diet type; it's a diet timetable. There are benefits with fasting when it comes to fat loss, and there are a lot of certain enzymes that switch on and off because fasting is a catabolic state. Everything's a breaking down, whereas when you're fed and full, that's a fed state, and different enzymes switch on and off. And I'm going to make a video on that as well. I'm going to make a series on fed states, so we'll discuss that in future videos. The thing with fasting is it's what I've said already about that people's metabolisms work at different rates. So, I mean, you might have a fairly fast metabolism, and if you're eating everything in 1 or 2 meals, you might absorb most of it, but not all of it. Some people might have a slow metabolism, might absorb a significant portion, but then a significant portion isn't being absorbed. It's just things to consider depending on what your goals are. I like fasting. Fasting's great. It's not ideal for me at the moment what I'm trying to achieve with my training goals, but I have done fasting. I've also done a vegan diet. I've done many different diets. So I will probably discuss all of them and my experience of those in the future as well. And finally, consuming protein sources that are 100% absorbable or close to will maximize your protein deposition. And when I say protein deposition, I mean we want to optimize protein synthesis and we want to prevent protein degradation to the best of our abilities. And with that all said, I'm going to end the video here. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.